Okay, so I was asked to provide some closing remarks and then maybe a little bit of an overview of what we tried to accomplish over the last day and a half, which I think is going to be very difficult. We've covered a lot of waterfront, so I do have a few comments I wanted to make and maybe revisit a few of the overarching themes that we touched on. So clearly we're making measurements using these new approaches of single cell, single molecule techniques at a resolution and precision that are really unprecedented. And clearly from just looking at the slate of speakers we had, it's clear that many of them actually weren't originally trained in the biological sciences. They come from mathematics, they come from engineering, they come from physics. And this again shows the importance of this convergence of different disciplines and trying to begin to apply those to the biological sciences if we really want to address some of the difficult questions. I think we also found out over the last day, and I think many of us knew this coming into the workshop, that there is a tremendous heterogeneity across these various cell types. And even when, heterogeneity among the same cell type, even when they're in the same tissue and in the same environment. And we heard this morning that where they are located in the context of the tissue also depends on how they behave. And so this, I guess what one could call a Herculean task of trying to actually map the entire human atlas cell by cell is just mind-boggling. And I'm also struck by the fact that how quickly this is all moving. We heard Alex this morning say something to the effect, well, what seems like ages ago, we did single-cell analysis on 500 retinal cells, and that was only 5 years ago. And now people are doing tens of thousands of cells at a time. And again, it's just amazing how quickly this field is moving. I think in terms of the knowledge we're getting, in terms of the understanding of biology, we're moving very quickly. And I also see the importance of applying these techniques to understanding of disease processes. We heard a lot yesterday about trying to identify the specific cell types that are responsible for disease. And if we can identify those cell types, then we can begin to understand the changes in the genes that are being turned on or turned off that are responsible for those disease processes. And clearly that information ultimately will lead to development of new therapies. So I think that's a very exciting application of these technologies. We also heard a lot about identifying new cell types, which is part of the whole goal of the atlas in some ways, the human cell atlas. I think we also heard a lot about the importance of workflow, adherence to SOPs, and questions about the reproducibility of the data that is being generated from these approaches, especially single cell. I feel in some ways more confident in terms of what we're seeing in the single molecule area in the way it's being detected. But for single cell, a lot of it is around how the tissues and cells are processed. And so we heard a lot about the potential confounders that may ultimately lead and introduce bias into those measurements. And clearly there's a lot of very smart people developing computational approaches that are hopefully going to address some of those confounders so that we can make sense of that data. In terms of the single molecule analyses, again, clearly the level and sensitivity of detection resolution that we have is it's very difficult even to believe that we're at that stage now. And we saw some very, very good talks yesterday. We saw films of individual molecules moving in bacteria. I mean, it's hard to believe that we can make those kinds of measurements. Those types of analyses also tell us a lot about the behavior of single molecules, so we can again begin to understand the biology, understand the distribution of those molecules, the movement, their trajectory, and the different interactions between individual molecules. So again, there's tremendous opportunity for developing new biomarkers so we can understand disease. And perhaps we can even develop new biomarkers for understanding the effects of environmental chemicals on living organisms, including people, which really leads us to the last part of what this workshop tried to do, is to try to bring this back to environmental health sciences. And I think there were many important points, and I'm sure I didn't capture them all. But I did have a couple that I wanted to mention here. And the first one was the statement of how important it is to take these results that we get from these new techniques and actually phenotypically anchor them. Because clearly we can make a lot of measurements, but again, phenotypically anchoring them in the biology. Another one that came up yesterday and today, and that is a question: what is normal? And of course, if we're trying to utilize this information, these data, for risk assessment and for decisions on policy, we certainly need to have some idea of what is normal and then what is adverse. It seemed like there's a lot of discussion even around that. And that's nothing new in toxicology. We talk about adaptive responses versus adverse responses. So I'm not quite sure if we made any more headway this morning on that topic, but clearly it's an important one. And I guess the last piece that I just wanted to mention was that, again, at least in my mind, and this is my bias, I can really see utilizing these tools already in terms of understanding biology, but clearly how we use them for risk assessment is still a tough one. And Patrick, I know you might think this might be easier to use it for that, but I'm still struggling a little bit with that. So again, I really want to thank all of the speakers we had over the day and a half. I felt like we really had some wonderful talks. I certainly learned a lot, and also would like to thank everyone who's participated. So with that, I think I'll bring our workshop to a close, and again, thank the organizing committee as well.